10 a.m. Thanks for joining us. Today's class is about becoming unstuck. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to be able to see certain things that I do in my day-to-day life. And these are weekly practices. So the stuff I share with you, I'm doing them. I'm practicing them. They're not in theory. They're not just like something I read out of a book. These are the things that I do on a regular basis. To tell you the truth, I'm just the type of person that I got to do things like 100 times before I recommend them. So these things that I share with you are definitely tried, tested, and at least experimented by me numerous times. So just first, I want to start with the idea of being stuck. Because I think all of us, I know all of us have the capacity to feel stuck, feel like we've hit a wall or feel like we've hit a plateau. And I want to show you kind of a little bit about what that looks like when we do hit a plateau, and also kind of like what's hiding underneath this plateau. So I'm just going to see if I can kind of draw this out. I want you just to picture that you have a box of reality that we are all in. And inside this box of reality are your rules, your beliefs, your identity, who you think you are, who you think you aren't. It covers all of it. It covers how you've interpreted life experiences. It covers all your biases. It covers what you think life is about. It covers all that piece, and it equals into a box. Now, this box is basically loaded. The box is you, and the box is past things, future ideas, how you deal with present reality, all that. Okay. So now I want you to think about when we feel stuck, we don't want to feel stuck. So we begin to fantasize about a reality that is outside of this particular box. And so we fantasize about not being stuck, an alternate reality that is beyond what we're currently experiencing. And we're oftentimes experiencing, when we feel stuck, we're experiencing the limitations of this particular range or capacity, or what the box is of our being, of our nature, of how we're experiencing and interpreting life. So there's this kind of fantasy box that we have. It's like, oh my God, like this would be incredible if I wasn't stuck. If I could break through this stuckness, if I can get on the other side of the stuckness, life is going to be really, really cool. And so here's the underlying mechanics that we experience when we're stuck. Is we begin to resent this existing box. We don't like it. But we don't like being stuck. We don't like the game that we're playing at this particular level. So we resent that. Then what we do is we begin to fantasize about life outside of this stuckness. So we have one box that we're kind of starting to resent and not like, and another box that we're beginning basically to fantasize about. Now, a fantasy. So now what we have in our brains is a split between the conscious world and the unconscious world. And let me just kind of like break this down a little bit more. When we resent something, or when we really don't like something, we are conscious, which I'll say C, we are conscious of the downsides of it, and we are unconscious of the upsides. And Freud talked about a conscious unconscious split. It's part of duality. So we conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides. In a fantasy, we are conscious of the upsides of the fantasy, and we are unconscious of the downsides. I'll say positive and negative. So we're conscious of the negatives, unconscious of the positives of the existing reality when we feel stuck. And when we feel stuck, we also create this fantasy in our mind's eye of a future that would be better than the existing future, we become conscious of the upsides and unconscious of the downsides. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So now this is where you get stuck. Essentially, it's stuck in this particular perspective. So, what do we do to break that through? Well, we have to enlighten ourselves to our unconscious world. And I'm circling the areas that we are ignorant and blind to, because part of feeling stuck and being stuck is having a certain degree or certain level of ignorance around something. Our perception is distorted. And I'm trying to show you here where your perception is distorted. The perception is distorted. Your mind is distorted, thinking and believing that there's more negatives than positives to your existing reality. And also at the exact same time, it's stuck in the idea and thinking and belief that a future fantasy comes with more and greater advantages than disadvantages. And that gets stuck. Now, what we do know, when we transcend the boundaries of duality in our mind, we know that basically life is filled with equal amounts of positives and negatives, supports and challenges. And we know that as we've kind of gone along in our life, these are, if you look back in life, you'll see that the things that you thought were bad, had good parts to it, and the things that you thought were good have bad parts to it. And so it comes with both good and bad. When you transcend kind of the moral picture of duality, when you transcend the idea of right and wrong, good and bad, and plus and negative, you actually free your mind. You liberate energy. So now I want to share with you here what I do when I feel stuck, because I've accumulated certain thinkings and certain ideas and certain beliefs. So what I do is I simply start revealing, you'll see this little arrow, I start writing and saying, okay, Steve, what's the value right now of you being at this particular level of feeling stuck? And I will start to rhyme off things that are valuable, upsides, things that are beneficial to my value systems. And I will start to rhyme those off so that I'm demonstrating and I'm bringing the information from my unconscious mind to my conscious mind. So I can become in my world right now, I can become more conscious and expose my ignorances to conscious and unconscious reality. So I do that. Then, as I go through that and I see that, wow, my current reality has both drawbacks and benefits to it, when I'm conscious of both, I have no interest to change my current reality because I see the benefits in me of it being exactly the way that it is. So spiritual teachers and things like that talk about, accepting what is. Well, this is actually the mechanics of accepting what is. And you, because you're bringing to mind a sense of wholeness through exposing ignorances that you might have, and that just produces a sense of wholeness. And as you express that sense of wholeness, you actually move into layers of accepting what is, because you see that your current reality comes with both challenging your values and supporting your values, and that's what we're exposing. So we can sit in that patiently now. Now we have greater degrees of patience because we get to see, wow, this reality, which I was kind of resenting, has both positives and negatives for me. It has value to me. I didn't see that. I couldn't see that before. Now I really see that. And I fully embrace that it has both positives and negatives. I was just working with a guy on last Friday, a handful of days ago, maybe 6 days ago, I guess it was. And he couldn't see that his mother smothering him when he was 18 was any value. And he's in his 50s. So he was resenting resenting her for getting in the way of an old girlfriend and things like that, and an old relationship dynamic. And so what we did was we basically went through and saw what the advantages to him were during that time. And one of the big benefits that he did not see because he was blind to it was that it actually was a moment where it allowed him an opportunity to step up and stand up to his mother, who had kind of dominated the scene for the first 18 years of his life. And he said, that was the first moment that I stood up to her. Boom. As soon as he saw that, he brought that unconscious information to his conscious mind, and his whole energy, his whole posture, his whole demeanor changed about that specific episode because he felt trapped and stuck that he couldn't do anything about the past. So he freed that up and liberated that energy. It was beautiful. It was really great. But when you spend the time on reflection and asking the right question, then and understand why you're asking the question, it allows the opportunity to liberate energy. So now, once you free up some of that energy and actually value your existing reality, then you could move towards asking the second part of the question about the fantasy. So if you just stay with me, we talk about the fantasy. Well, the fantasy in our mind, the reason it's partly a fantasy is because it comes with more positives or upsides than it does downsides. We don't account for the downsides in a fantasy, but your system knows it. Okay. And so part of the block of not making progress is because you haven't accounted for some of the downsides or the future challenges. And so you fantasize about this future reality, but you don't necessarily take action on it because you haven't accounted for what the negatives are. And the negatives act like the brake in your central nervous system. And you don't recognize, you're like, I want this, but I'm not going after it because you haven't accounted for some of the downsides to what you're about to experience if you were to break through this stuckness. So the question that we ask is well, what are the drawbacks if you had exactly what you want? I'll give you an example on this. If you had exactly what you want tomorrow, what are the drawbacks to it? A woman I was working with the other day, I said she had kind of frozen shoulder. And I said, listen, if the frozen shoulder was gone tomorrow, you woke up tomorrow morning and it was gone, what are the drawbacks to you if that fantasy was actually achieved tomorrow morning? And she began to come up with, and she realized that if it was gone tomorrow morning, she would lose the leverage. She would lose the leverage of her existing pain to keep her on track with her lifestyle practices that she was developing. She said, well, if the pain was gone, I might forget about going into my cold showers. I might forget about, I would just probably wake up in the morning and go back to my old patterns of like, instead of being nice and slow in the morning and communicating with my family, I'd go back and race back into life again. So she started to unpack to see like, if this fantasy was achieved by your pain gone tomorrow, that there's actually drawbacks to it. And she saw that in that moment, that pain in her shoulder was a leverage for her to grow and develop. So this is what I'm saying is that we don't pay attention to, she's thinking she's stuck with the shoulder. She resents this current reality. She's fantasizing that the pain is gone. That's what she's fantasizing about. So we say, what's the advantages to this pain so far? And we see a whole bunch of examples for her as to what the advantages are that she actually has this pain. And I said, hey, listen, if the pain was gone tomorrow, what are the drawbacks and the downsides that the pain being gone would have? What impact would that have? And she realized in that moment that this is a leverage for her growth, and she's developing herself and she's evolving. And yes, the shoulder pain is a bit of a leverage point, but she could see and appreciate that she was growing in this existing reality. And also, if she got her fantasy she wanted, she'd be pulling away potentially her leverage for change. And so just by seeing that, it allows you to settle more patiently in your existing reality, because on the other side of it's going to come new challenges, but you also acknowledge that in your existing reality, there's very, very great value and benefit to what's going on and how you're evolving as a human being. Most people not most people, we get stuck in the third stage of healing, stuck in a perspective. We get stuck in that when we've kind of blanketed our reality and generalized our reality to think this is bad and the other side is good. As soon as we've done that, we're trapped in a perspective that is going to keep us stuck. So we need to break those patterns so that we can see that life is on the way, not in the way, and that as we grow and evolve, we are going to have new supports and new challenges that come. Fantasies are one-sided. Stuckness in this reality is one-sided. Both have ignorances to them. So in my work that I do with people, we are looking to expose the ignorances so that you can see with greater wholeness and clarity exactly how your reality is serving you, and also your next reality, how that will serve you. And amazingly enough, when you do that, the system naturally becomes unstuck because you're accounting for where the biases are, where the ignorances are, which create the stuckness in the first place. Okay. So this is the way through the stuckness. What that ends up producing is patience and appreciation for exactly where you are. And it also creates an anticipation because you've accounted for some of the future challenges. So now your system is ready to take on more. And one further layer that I'll cover with some people is that if these challenges arise in your future fantasy, how are you going to deal with them? So that we also know and we train the system to look at how it's actually going to be dealing with these future challenges so that you're not kind of blindsided with something and you can't handle it. So you kind of partly pre-planned how you're going to manage those challenges in your future reality. And while you're doing all this, you are literally creating your future while you're doing this. So this is one way that we become very liberated and unstuck in a reality, and how we drive home appreciation and gratitude for where we're at and eager anticipation for the future, which comes with both benefits and drawbacks. And it's part of your own natural evolution of things. But this, to me, this is the underlying mechanics of being stuck. Okay. So thanks very much for kind of hanging out with me. I know this is a very brief class, but I think there's enough information here for you to kind of digest things and to work on some things. I'm going to close up the talk for right now, but I'd love, if you have any questions, for you to send them in the chat so that I can answer them. But I'm going to close the kind of the recorded part right now, and then we can answer any questions. Okay.